They stole my newborn while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. Signed forged papers, renamed him, and raised him behind mansion walls like he was theirs. 10 years later, I walked into their home. Before you hear my story, tap subscribe and drop a comment if you've ever been silenced or underestimated. The sky didn't cry the day they took my baby. I remember that. It should have. The clouds should have broken apart, sobbing into the cracked pavement of our neighborhood like I did on the hospital floor. But it didn't. It was just ordinary. That's the part that haunts me. His name was Alex. Born with a tuft of dark hair and fists clenched like he already knew the world would try to steal him. He was only 2 weeks old when I woke up to a white room and empty arms. I had named him after my father. My father was poor, yes, but decent. He raised me alone in a one-bedroom flat in Houston. We didn't have much, but I was loved, genuinely, purely. That's what I wanted to give Alex. Even if I didn't have much. Even if I was a single mother at 22 with no one but a second-hand stroller and stubborn hope. But that morning, there was no stroller. No hope. Just 2 officers at the foot of my hospital bed telling me I was unstable, that I had signed adoption papers while medicated, that the child had already been placed. Legally. Irrevocably. I laughed at first. Deliriously. "You're joking," I whispered. I didn't. They handed me a file. A signature that barely looked like mine, dated the day after my emergency C-section. I hadn't even been conscious. My throat closed around the scream. The nurse avoided my eyes. Later, I learned the truth. A nurse confessed in secret how a wealthy couple had been waiting for a baby, and I had fit their criteria: poor, unmarried, no legal backing, an easy case to scrub. She whispered one name before disappearing: Senator Miriam Miller. Miller. A family so high up the food chain, I wasn't even a statistic to them. Just a uterus with a heartbeat. I tried everything. Filed complaints. Marched into courthouses. Picketed with handmade signs in front of their estate gates. They had lawyers, power, image. I had calluses and grief. One day, a man in a black suit approached me near the courthouse steps. He didn't identify himself. Just said, "Let it go. Or you'll end up losing more." I did lose more. My job. My apartment. My sanity. But not my memory. I disappeared after that. People thought I'd given up. They were wrong. I was learning. Watching. Becoming. Over the next 10 years, I bled into the margins of the world. I cleaned hotel rooms, studied night classes, worked as an au pair in Europe. Quiet. Invisible. Educated. I studied child psychology. Pedagogy. Rich people etiquette. I learned their language, their laughs, their lies, their soft spots. And I watched them from a distance. Always. Senator Miriam and her perfect husband, Jonathan. And their beautiful adopted son, now called Roman. He would be 11. The same stormy eyes. The same left dimple. My Alex. My son was being raised behind iron gates and glass walls, called by a name that didn't belong to him, by people who wore matching tennis whites and smiled like saints. But they were thieves. They didn't rescue him. They stole him. From me. I returned under a new name. Emma. With crisp credentials, references, and an accent softened by time. And I applied to be a live-in nanny. You wouldn't believe how easy it was. The Miller were older now, Miriam grayer, with a stiff gait masked by pearls and Pilates. Jonathan still had a politician's handshake and predator's smile. Roman, my baby, was polite but quiet. Too quiet. I could see it in his eyes. He didn't laugh with his chest. He watched everyone, especially her. On my first day, Miriam asked, "Do you have children, Emma?" I smiled. Not anymore. The house was massive. Cold. Too clean. A modern palace of beige carpets and secrets. I moved like a ghost, taking mental notes. I noticed things. How Roman never asked for hugs. How he flinched at sudden noises. How Miriam's affection came with conditions. How Jonathan worked late but never seemed tired. I wasn't just there to serve. I was there to dismantle. And it started with the truth. 3 weeks into the job, I found the nursery. Locked, tucked behind the east hallway. Still decorated like it was waiting for a baby. Dusty mobiles. Expired diapers. A small blue frame on the shelf, Alex, 2 weeks old. My blood went cold. They had known. From the beginning. They hadn't just taken him, they kept a shrine to their crime. I took the photo. I didn't ask permission. That night, I watched Roman sleep. His legs curled up like they did when he was inside me. My fingers hovered near his cheek. He stirred but didn't wake. He didn't know me. But he would. I began planting seeds. First, I let Roman see me cry. Just once. In the hallway. Soft, vulnerable. Enough to stir his curiosity. Then I told him, I used to have a little boy like you. He was taken. I didn't say more. Children don't trust words. They trust truth felt but unspoken. Then I started altering routines. Shifting Miriam's meds by half a pill. Misplacing her planner. Leaving her car unlocked with the lights on. Things she could dismiss at first, until she couldn't. Then came Jonathan's turn. I let him accidentally see me once in the hallway. Watched the flicker behind his eyes. Power. Entitlement. Temptation. Men like him were always predictable. I began collecting his texts. His late-night calls. The transfer slips from his burner phone. A hidden affair with a younger aide. Not a surprise. But it wasn't cheating I wanted to prove. It was the kind of man who buys children. By the 3rd month, Miriam was unraveling. She accused the gardener of stealing. Slapped Roman across the face for breaking a wine glass. Fired the housekeeper in a rage. Her face was thinner now, mouth twitching like a trapped rat. But no one believed her. Because I was sweet Emma. Efficient. Loyal. The best thing that's happened to this house, Jonathan said once. I let Roman hear it. I let Miriam hear it, too. Then one night, I told her the truth. Not all of it. Just enough. I said I once had a son. That he was stolen. That his name was Alex. And that sometimes, I thought he was still alive. She stared at me like she'd seen a ghost. She didn't sleep that night. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Because revenge isn't loud. It's slow. Measured. Poetic. And I was just getting started. Roman started following me. Not in the obvious way children shadow their caretakers, but quietly. He'd appear in the doorway when I folded laundry. Ask odd questions like, "Did you ever have a dog?" or "What do dreams mean?" He once watched me peel an apple into a single curling strip and whispered, "You do it like me." I smiled, but inside, I was choking. "You are me," I wanted to scream. But I couldn't. Not yet. Truth told too early is a wound, not a weapon. Instead, I planted more seeds. I read to him at night, sitting on the edge of his bed, the same way I imagined I would have if they hadn't taken him. Stories about orphans who found their real families. Stories where monsters wore pearls and masks. Roman listened with the attentiveness of someone starved for subtext. One night, he said, "Sometimes I feel like I was someone else. Like this isn't my real name." My heart seized. "What name would you choose?" He paused. "Alex," he said. "It sounds like me." I didn't cry. I nodded like it was just another name. But I didn't sleep that night. Miriam was unraveling. Her routine, once pristine, frayed at the edges. She left the stove on. Missed meetings. Cancelled interviews last minute. She no longer held court over the house, she haunted it. I added to it, of course. Slipped outdated clippings about missing infants into her newspaper. Whistled lullabies near her door at night. Left framed photos of Roman as a baby on her vanity, copies of the one she thought I'd never found. She started seeing ghosts. But the real ghost was me. Jonathan, for all his charm, began circling like a shark sensing blood in the water. He lingered too long in the kitchen. Stood closer than necessary when we discussed Roman's school. Once, he touched my wrist lightly and said, "You're not like the others." I met his gaze evenly. "No. I'm not." That's when I knew he saw me not as a threat, but as an opportunity. Men like him always think with their hands first. It would be his undoing. My plan was simple: turn the house inside out. Make Roman mine again, not by force, but by truth. Expose Miriam as unfit. Expose Jonathan as the predator he was. And when the truth finally shattered their perfect facade, make sure it was Roman who chose to leave. But there was a problem. He loved them. Even in his quiet way. Even through fear and confusion. Children don't love perfectly, they love the way they're taught. Conditioned. Rewarded. I couldn't just tell him they were monsters. I had to let him see it. And that meant pushing the house to its edge. I started with Miriam's charity gala. An annual event. Important. Prestigious. Cameras. Donors. The perfect stage. I offered to help coordinate. And I, accidentally, invited a reporter who had once covered illegal adoptions. A woman who had reached out to me years ago, when no one else would listen. I sent her a tip under a pseudonym. Senator Miriam Miller's miracle adoption may not have been legal. Watch her closely. Ask the right questions. The night of the gala, the house was a hive of glass and perfume and falseness. Miriam wore a gold gown 2 decades too young for her. Jonathan worked the room like he was still in office. Roman stood off to the side in a blazer that didn't fit quite right. I kept him close. "You look like someone important," I told him. He shrugged. "I don't feel important." "You are," I said softly. "You just don't know why yet." When the reporter cornered Miriam with a soft-spoken question about adoption records, I watched the senator's spine go rigid. Her wine glass tilted. Her eyes darted, not to Jonathan, but to me. She knew. She couldn't prove it. But she knew. That night, she screamed at the staff. Fired the driver. Accused Roman of planting spyware on her laptop because he was too quiet. Her voice cracked. Her eyes bulged. She was losing her grip, and I made sure Roman saw every jagged edge. He started pulling away from her. It was subtle at first. Not wanting to sit next to her during dinner. Taking longer to come home from school. Asking me questions he should have been asking her. Do you think some moms don't know how to love right? Do you think people can take things that don't belong to them and still sleep at night? The questions weren't just about her. They were about himself. Jonathan, meanwhile, was circling closer. He offered me a drink one night. Told me I reminded him of someone from a lifetime ago. His hand brushed mine. His wedding ring glinted like a threat. I leaned in and whispered, I bet you like to collect lifetimes. He blinked. I walked away. I wanted him to want me. Not because I needed validation. Because I needed leverage. And 2 nights later, he gave it to me. The house had security cameras. I knew where. I knew when. So when he followed me into the study at midnight and locked the door behind him, I let him. When he touched my waist and whispered disgusting things, I smiled, into the lens. When I shoved him off and walked out, trembling, I cried, just enough to seem scared, not victorious. The footage went to the reporter the next morning. 2 days later, the headlines exploded. Miller family in turmoil, allegations of abuse and illegal adoption resurface. Senator's husband accused of predatory behavior toward nanny. Missing infant case reopened. Who is Roman Miller? The house imploded. Miriam locked herself in her bedroom. She screamed when Roman knocked on the door. Jonathan denied everything. Said I had seduced him. Called me a manipulative snake. Roman heard it all. That night, he found me in the kitchen. Why are they lying? He asked. I knelt beside him. Because the truth scares people who've lived in lies for too long. He nodded. Did you really have a son? I held his hand. I did. What happened to him? I looked him in the eyes. He was stolen. By people who thought they deserved him more. Silence. Then, he whispered, what was his name? I opened my mouth. Closed it. Then said, Alex. He didn't speak. Just stared at me. His lower lip quivered, but he didn't cry. He just asked, was he happy? I squeezed his hand. I think he was waiting to be. That night, I packed a bag. Not mine. His. The storm began at 3 a.m. Not the weather, them. Miriam screaming in the hallway. Jonathan roaring back. Doors slamming. Roman frozen in his room, clutching a bag I'd helped him pack. He didn't ask questions. He just waited. Because deep down, something in him had started to remember. I heard the slap before I reached the stairwell. Miriam's voice cracked, he's not yours. He's ours. We saved him. Jonathan growled, you think anyone's gonna believe that now? You crazy old witch. I stepped into the light. Touch him again, and I swear I'll end you both. Jonathan turned to me, bloodshot, frantic. You set this up. You poisoned him against us. No, I said calmly. You did that all by yourself. Years of silence. Control. Secrets. You raised a child like a possession. And now you're shocked he wants to be free. Miriam stood behind him, shaking, hair unkempt, her robe dragging on the marble like a funeral veil. She pointed a trembling hand at Roman. He doesn't even know who he is. He is our son now. We gave him a better life than you ever could. I stepped closer. Then why is he afraid of you? She didn't answer. Just shook her head. I prayed for a child, she whispered. We tried IVF for 6 years. 6. And then you came along. Poor. Disposable. We did what we had to do. You bought a baby, I said coldly. You stole mine. Roman stepped forward. He looked at me. Then at her. Is it true? He asked, voice barely audible. Miriam clutched her chest like the truth was killing her. You were never supposed to know. You were never supposed to. That's not an answer, he said. Then, for the first time in his life, Roman turned away from her. And took my hand. They didn't stop us. They couldn't. Because just then, the doorbell rang. And behind it stood 2 federal agents. And the reporter. And a warrant. The raid was swift. Efficient. Everything they'd buried, brought into daylight. Forged documents. Hospital bribes. Quiet donations to hush whistleblowers. One name after another folded under questioning. The nurse who signed the fake adoption confessed. The judge retired overnight. The family foundation froze. But the bloodline. The Miller name. It shattered. Miriam was charged with felony conspiracy and unlawful adoption. Jonathan. 3 separate charges, abuse of power, witness tampering, and attempted assault. The public devoured it. Senator. Husband. Scandal. And the boy caught in the center. But Roman was no longer a boy caught in the middle. He was my son. The courts tried to make it clinical, custody reviews, therapy sessions, expert evaluations. I did what they asked. Jumped through their flaming hoops. Not for validation. But for him. He never called me Mom in front of the officials. But one day, after our 3rd appointment, he waited until we were alone in the waiting room. He looked at me and said, I used to have dreams, where someone sang to me before I could talk. I think it was you. I couldn't answer. I just took his hand and let the tears fall freely. On the day the final ruling was announced, the judge spoke slowly, carefully, eyes flicking between us like a metronome. Given the overwhelming evidence of misconduct and the clear emotional bond between the minor and Ms. Emma Brown, formerly Isabella Brown, I am awarding full and permanent custody. Miriam collapsed in her seat. Jonathan didn't show. I held Roman's hand the entire time. This time, I didn't let go. Months passed. Roman adjusted faster than anyone expected. He painted. Wrote songs. Grew out his hair. He laughed, a real laugh, from the chest. The dimple I remembered from his baby years deepened when he smiled. He started calling me Mom. At first by accident. Then on purpose. We had nothing of luxury. No estate. No butlers. No marble staircase. Just a small apartment and evenings of burnt food and second-hand books. But we had each other. And he was free. One night, as we watched the news together, a story flashed across the screen. Former Senator Miriam Miller declared mentally unfit to stand trial. A photo of her, hollow-eyed, seated alone in a hospital corridor. I turned the volume down. Roman didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "I don't hate her. I think that's worse than hate." I looked at him. "What do you feel?" He thought. "I feel like she wanted to be my mother so badly, she never stopped to ask what kind of mother she was becoming." I nodded. "That's wisdom, Alex." He smiled. "It's Roman now, too. But only because I choose it." And I knew then, he wasn't broken. He was becoming whole. Sometimes, I still think of that moment in the hospital. The morning my arms were empty. It took 10 years, a new name, and a war I never asked for. But I got my child back. And I took everything from the people who tried to bury us. Not with fire. Not with bullets. But with truth. That's the part they never saw coming. A year later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo. Torn at the edges. A baby in a nursery. Labeled only. Alex, 2 weeks old. Beneath it, one line. You never stopped fighting. I never stopped watching. It wasn't signed. But I knew the handwriting. Tell me below, have you ever turned pain into purpose? If you felt that revenge burned slow and cold, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more real-life revenge stories. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thank you for being part of this healing. Until next time. Stay steady. Stay kind.